To order. Thank you, everybody. Well, welcome to your Trade, Commerce, Technology Committee, or actually it was changed today. It's now called the Innovation, Grants, Technology, Commerce, and Trade Committee. So it's got a new name because we're going to be taking on some oversight responsibilities on grants. At the moment, I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Bonin and Councilmember Buscaino. Councilmember Krikorian will be joining us shortly, and I believe Councilwoman Martinez will be out today. I'm moving quickly because because we got such a late start, because council went late, we may run into quorum issues, so I'm going to try to move things quickly. And toward that end, I'd actually like to take public comment on items, because my goal is going to be to take items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on consent. But we have some cards, so before I can do that, if I could have, on those items, we have Ms. Ramirez. Is she here? Ms. Ramirez, on all of those items, you have a total of 5 minutes. So
does that include public comments? Or
public comment is a separate item afterwards, but
thank you.
You've put in cards on every item, so if you wish to speak to items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you have a total of 5 minutes, and then we can move those items on.
I'm sorry, the numbers were again, please?
Items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Okay.
You've placed cards on.
Okay.
Now you have cards on other items as well, but you have a total of 5 minutes, so
Okay.
you
May
can
I
use all
put
your
those
time
comments? May I add those comments, those items that?
Yes, you can talk on all the items.
Thank you, sir. Always, I thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll start with number 2. I would not recommend Didi Hirsch, since they have a high staff turnover and they are slow to respond and or non-responsive, get another mental health care provider that meets high demand emergencies and or timely responses, but it isn't Didi Hirsch. Maybe you can provide 211 or 311 for homeless info and or 311 or 211 for tourist residents general information. Designate one number for the classification seekers of information. Thank you. Number 4, I approve only on the grounds that it will not unlawfully hire wetbacks and Chango Latino gangbangers. E-Verify will not tell you if they are gang affiliated. Spare us all the sanctimonious bull. Hire first and foremost military veterans who are well qualified to do this hard labor all throughout our LAX International Airport. Item number 5. First, I hope that if we contract with Sogahi Law Group to assist LA World Airports, that they will concur that pilot safety is a priority. Again, pilot safety is a priority. For with or for without our brilliant honks, pilots, there is no LAX. So maintaining land use for its intended purposes will keep us within the environmental scope of success. And number 7, hell no. Here we go again to illegally subsidize these damn, nosy, jealous, racist, hate-mongering wetbacks and Chango Latino gangbanging pussies and thieves at taxpayers' expense to innovatively fund a special parking revenue fund for El Pueblo Chango Parking Automation Project when homeless military legal law-abiding citizens don't have showers, bathrooms, laundries, or safe lock-proof lockers. So again, please, hell no. Number 9. I'm curious, is the City of Los Angeles Store Retrieve LLC storage safe, secure, and lock-proof from wetbacks and Chango gangbangers? Because there are no locks that are lock-proof or safe, secure from these pigs and undesirables. So deport, so again, deport. And number 10, deport all wetbacks and gangbangers, and you'll cut 100% of the Chango gas and carbon dioxide, gridlocks, famine, disease, drought, and overpopulation. And I think that's it. And having said that, I would just like to comment on the, excuse me, I would just like to comment on the locks. I wish that the City of Los Angeles would offer not only the city employees and the city business, but also to the taxpayers, a storage facility that is safe and secure where no one can break in or tamper with the locks. Again, two issues. There are no locks on the market anywhere, and I've gone from here to the Orient to try to find locks that are safe and secure where no one can pick through these locks. There are no locks unless you use crazy glue, and I've done that too, and believe me, that was hell. So please try to find a place that is safe and secure where no one can break in or tamper or get into your property, and also what locks are there that no one can break or tamper with as well. So Home Depot doesn't sell locks. Orchards or any other hardware store does not sell locks that are safe-proof or lock-proof. Gangbangers can pick them. They know how. I don't know how, but they do. And so that's my plight. We need to find a place, storages that are safe and secure where no one can get in, not even paid off through the employees, and locks that will definitely work. And only I don't know, I guess you'll have to cut the cable just to get through and break those locks. But other than that, I want to thank you very much, Blumenfield, for being so gracious and so kind and so courteous. Thank you. And yours, and Mr. Espinosa, you are lovely too. For a Latino, you are a lovely young man. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramirez. So I'd like to take items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 without objection on consent. Seeing no objection, those items are approved on consent. Item 7, though, we hear that there is an amendment from CAO. If CAO could come forward with that amendment. And then just so, for housekeeping purposes, people understand how we're doing this, we're going to quickly get through 7, then we're going to go back to item 2, then item 9, 10, and then we're going to finish up with the last item because it's a report only on the ITA top 10 priorities. So if I lose quorum for item 1 at the end, that's okay, but I want to get through the other items while I have quorum. So go ahead with item 7.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Bianca Swan, Project Coordinator for the Innovation and Performance Commission, and I just wanted to add to our original report that Council, subject to the approval of the Mayor, instruct the Board of El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument Authority Commissioners to repay the Special Parking Revenue Fund, SPRF, loan in the amount of $350,000 for the El Pueblo Parking Automation Pilot Project by making 7 annual payments of $50,000 to the SPRF once all core budgetary obligations are met.
Okay. Without objection, that amendment is adopted. And without objection, item 7 is adopted. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move to item 2, followed by item 9, followed by item 10, and then back to 1. So on item 2, Mr. Espinosa, if you could read the item into the record, please.
Item number 2 is a motion from Councilmembers Rue and Huizar relative to reviewing the available call options such as general numbers like 211, 311, and 877 Ask LAPD, and specific numbers like the Department of Mental Health's crisis line 800-854-771 and the D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Hotline 877-727-4747 to report on the effectiveness of these services and recommend which numbers to call in which circumstances. And this was also referred to the Homelessness and Poverty Committee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council members. Mark Wolf, Executive Officer with ITA.
Donna Archia, 311 Director.
Council members, as you know, 311 is the public face for the city and receives calls for both city and external agency information and services. 311 currently maintains a services directory database that includes information on homelessness services from both the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, LAHSA, as well as LA County's 211 social services agencies. As a result of this motion, ITA will be reaching out to both LAHSA and 211 to ensure that the information that we maintain in our database is complete and the methods that we're using for providing the information is most effective. We're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Anything additional to add?
No.
I mean, it's one of those things that's frustrating for constituents calling into the city, being transferred to multiple departments. Something I certainly am happy to have ITA working on and to work with the county. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm going to recommend that we adopt this motion unless we have any additional questions from members. Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the 211 goes, obviously we've seen an increase in our homeless population in the city of Los Angeles. Have we seen a spike in the 211 calls this last year?
I don't have information on the entire year, but I can tell you in the last 4 months since we've been testing our new system, we've handled 600 calls related to 211 services and primarily referring them to 211 for additional information.
Very good. Thank you. I know you're not here to prepare on the numbers but it just came to mind. Thank you.
Mr. Bonnet.
Just one question. I'm in favor of the motion, but I just wanted to get a sense of how far we are from where I think we want to go and where we are now. If someone in Venice or San Pedro called 311 and said, there's someone who's homeless who is sleeping in the alley behind my home, what happens with that call?
We have a variety of referral information available, primarily through LASA, that we would refer them to them, and they have an emergency response team who can provide a variety of services, shelter, food, medical attention, mental health. And if that doesn't work, we also can provide 211 that provides similar types of resources, and that's primarily what we do in that situation.
Okay. Just to provide context about what that actually means is 211 doesn't send anybody out to respond. They can just give referrals to services. And LASA's emergency response teams, those really are not 24/7 dispatches either. So one of the things that we really lack in Los Angeles that hopefully we can ramp up to is the ability to have a 211 system that results in a dispatch so that folks don't wind up using LAPD as the person you call when there's someone in distress in the neighborhood. We've got a long way to go to get there because right now we just simply give referrals mainly, and particularly if the person who's calling isn't the homeless person but is reporting someone who's homeless that they want to help, we're not quite making the connection. So hopefully through the work the county's doing and we're doing coming in January and February, we can get closer to having an actual dispatch service of LASA teams.
Right.
Thanks.
And just, toward that end, I've talked about this before and I want to pursue it further with ITA is, ultimately I want to see us develop a homeless app, where we are able to help not only have, in the palm of your hand, have the referral information for folks who are homeless, who maybe the last thing that they give up is their cell phone. That's a big part of it because we've seen that that's often the case, that even people who are homeless often have a smartphone. But also for precisely the person that Mr. Bonnet is talking about, for the Good Samaritan who sees someone who is homeless, who wants to help, to be able to get the referral information at their fingertips or be able to, in my futuristic vision of how we can make this happen, sort of an Uber-like service where you can bring the services to the homeless individual, where you can start a dispatch call from your phone and you can track what's actually happening with that service, whether a LASA employee is being dispatched or where the nearest shelters are, and you can actually, someone can book that shelter or something to that effect. I mean, that's where I want us to go. And I know we're developing that as a motion and an app, but I've brought it up before in this committee, and I'm using this as an opportunity to plant that seed with you again, because we really need to do something there. But this motion is pretty straightforward in terms of getting additional data, and so without any further questions or objections, this motion is adopted. Next, what did I say was next here? So we've done 2. We're going to move to item 9. Mr. Espinosa, if you would read that into the record.
Item 9 is a report from the Office of the City Clerk relative to a contract for citywide record management services with StoreTreeve, LLC, for storage of the city records in commercial record storage facilities and related services.
Great, and we have Greg Allison, clerk's office, and we have clerk, Holly Walcott, table. If you could tell us about the purpose of this RFP and why Store Reeve is being recommended.
Good afternoon, Holly Walcott, City Clerk. With me I have Todd Gadowski, who is the records manager, who participated on the panel for the RFP for the offsite storage. The city has had approximately 190,000 boxes of records stored off-site at Iron Mountain for the last, I don't even know how many years, Todd?
Oh, it goes back 10 or more years.
And so it was time to go out to RFP, and we have now gone out twice. Our original one was canceled after we decided to enhance the terms of the RFP and make it a little more clear and to extend the term. So we went back out a second time, and the report in front of you goes through what the process was, and it also talks about the 2 protesters that were filed. I believe they are, at least one of them is here today. And the protests, one just asked about the rating system, and then the other one has concerns about the local business ordinance and how it was applied. We have still found in favor of Store Reeve, and we're here to answer any questions. Is there anything you'd like to add, Todd?
I think you've covered all the salient points. We're seeking a 10-year term with a 3-year extension option. This is for storage. We don't want to do this and move the boxes every few years. The panel consisted of myself and representatives from other user departments. City Clerk's office is not a major user of the contract, but we're managing the RFP.
Yes, all of our storage is housed at Piper Tech in the Record Center. Our Record Center holds approximately 190,000 boxes. What we are trying to do is reduce the number of boxes that are stored off-site by user departments. Again, as Todd pointed out, we don't expend any of our funds on off-site records.
Could you address, I mean, the other company is questioning, specifically over the local business and cost to the city is what they're questioning
Right. So basically, Store Reeve is located in Montebello. So they're located in the County of Los Angeles, which in our mind qualified them as a local business under the ordinance. During the protest period, one of the other companies said, look, they're not a local company because they're a subsidiary of a larger company that has various entities nationwide. So by that very fact, it would make them not a local business. So we didn't have the expertise to determine, because all of Store Reeve is located in Southern California and in the County of Los Angeles, but to the extent a parent company is outside, we didn't know how to make that determination. And at that point of time, that's when contract ad was brought in, and the paperwork was filed with contract ad to make the determination. So the protester is complaining that this determination was not made until after the RFP period, but our contention is there was nothing in the RFP that required the determination by contract ad prior, and it has not changed the facts.
What does it matter if the determination is made before or after?
That's what our contention is. And the protester, I believe, thinks that they should have received the determination prior to the RFP closing.
Any additional questions, members? Okay, thank you very much. We have a couple of cards on this. We're going to do 1 minute apiece on the cards. Thank you. So if we could bring forward Tom McGovern, followed by Patrick McKillop, followed by, no, that's it.
Thank you. I'm the president of File Keepers. We're part of a company, Raleigh Enterprises. File Keepers has been in business over 40 years here in Los Angeles. Our parent corporation is headquartered on Melrose Avenue. Raleigh Enterprises. We have a number of businesses that we operate here in the city. It's very clear. The RFP, and I'm going to leave these for you, did have a paragraph, 5.29, that references the local business ordinance. In spite of what the city clerk says that it was not part of the RFP, you'll see in black and white, in fact, that it was. My company was the only submitter that had the LBE certification during this process. I've participated in numerous RFPs over the decades, and RFPs have hard close dates. You don't change anything after you submit an RFP. It's locked. So my competitor, who acknowledged, by the way, paragraph 5.29, you'll see there, knew about this but did not have the certification. So I'm here to seek an administrative remedy to this recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was Tom McGovern, followed by Mr. Patrick McKillop.
Thank you. I'm here basically to talk about the contract as a whole. The contracts are very competitive. It's going to save the city a lot of money for many years to come. When we start talking about this protest over this ordinance, it wasn't that anybody was trying to work around it, absolutely not at all. And when we presented it, but this contract being $10 million in value, the actual ordinance does call for certain bids would not have to qualify. So it wasn't that anybody was ignoring it. It was simply that it's over $1 million. So therefore, the ordinance could play or not play. We did everything in the RFP responses. This is not the first time we responded to it. But I think probably the largest protest is coming from the fact that this contract is going to bring great savings not only to the city of Los Angeles, but to any other government or university here in Southern California where people can take advantage of it.
Thank you. Members, without objection, I'm going to move forward on approving the city clerk's recommendations unless there's any additional questions or comments. Okay, so that is the order. We're moving forward with the clerk's recommendations, and we will move now to item number 10. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read that item into the record?
Item number 10 has many reports on file from Los Angeles World Airports, Los Angeles Harbor Department, Sister Cities of Los Angeles Department of Transportation, General Services Department, Bureau of Street Services, and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment relative to actions to reduce the city's carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions to at least 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. After this agenda was released, a CAO report was also submitted, and this was also referred to the Energy and Environment Committee.
Thank you. Before we have staff come to the table, we have one of my colleagues and the maker of the motion here, Mr. Koretz, and as a courtesy, we'd like to give you the first word and be able to introduce your motion to the committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I appreciate you hearing this item today. As the international community of nations meets and going into the Paris climate talks this week, it's not only appropriate for LA to take action, it's really our responsibility. We need to show the world, and especially developing countries, that the city that's known for its smog and conspicuous consumption actually can do its part in the fight against climate change. The goal mentioned in the motion, reducing greenhouse gas emissions to 80% of 1990 levels by 2050, is their internationally accepted goal for how to keep the planet under 2 degrees Celsius of warming. And that number generally correlates to the consensus among climate scientists as the number that we need to hit to guarantee the survival of mankind. 17 months ago when I adopted this, it was cutting edge. Now it's very mainstream as we're hearing it. New York City has adopted it, Chicago's adopted it, San Francisco's adopted it, and even the state of California. And all of those entities adopted their motions as goals, except for San Francisco, which has actually made it the law and part of their municipal code. I want to emphasize that this needs to be more than just a goal for our city departments. It needs to be a citywide goal, and it needs to have equity as a central tenet. Climate change is already impacting frontline, lower income and underserved communities. Heat waves hit especially harder and deadlier if you can't afford air conditioning, as just one example. This proposal will help us solve the public health problems associated with all of our air pollution, particularly in these communities, and it will create a number of good green jobs along the way. Council members Blumenfield and Weezer introduced an excellent energy efficiency and water conservation ordinance, which the council approved a couple of weeks ago. That'll move us a long way in the right direction, and we should all commend their terrific leadership on this effort. We also need a portfolio of solutions to get us the rest of the way, such as the Cool Cities Challenge, a grassroots bottom-up effort which takes climate action to a block-by-block, house-by-house, business-by-business level. And our Neighborhood Council's Sustainability Alliance has shown great interest in helping to lead that effort. Just to briefly explain the framework of this motion, and then I'll leave the rest of the departments who have all done terrific work in getting their reports together. There are really three parts. Part one is having the departments report on the efforts they've already been making, which is part of what we'll do here today. Part two, by approving this motion, we're setting the citywide goal to reduce our greenhouse gases 80% of 1990 levels by 2050, and also for our Department of Water and Power to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2030, which they've agreed to work towards. Part three, approving this will then send the departments off to figure out what they can do to lead the city even further towards that goal. So I want to thank all the departments for working with me and my office over the past year or so. It's been a lot of work, but I know it'll pay off in the long run. And I also want to thank the advocates and supporters, including any who might happen to be here today. And I thank you for hearing this motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koretz, and thank you for being a champion on so many environmental issues, and especially this issue of global climate change and making sure that our city, we do our part for not just for our own Angelenos, but for the world, essentially, which is what this is about, and making sure that LA is a leader as we move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Catherine Yang of the Los Angeles Sister Cities Organization to the table. And thank you, Ms. Yang, for joining us. And please tell us how you think the sister cities of Los Angeles could join LA in its mission to reduce greenhouse gases.
I'm here today on behalf of Tom Gilmore, Chairman of Sister Cities of Los Angeles. Not only does Sister Cities of Los Angeles embrace this motion, but we're prepared to call upon all our global sister cities to adopt equally aggressive or stronger greenhouse gas emission reduction policies. We have began by involving ourselves with the tripartite between Auckland, New Zealand, and Guangzhou, China. We're hoping that through this we can create a mutual responsibility for climate change mitigation, and we'll continue this initiative by establishing an open channel and acting as a conduit for sharing best greenhouse gas mitigation practices among our global sister cities. Especially on behalf of our most vulnerable sister cities of Los Angeles stands prepared to encourage its member cities to join or exceed Los Angeles' goal to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. On behalf of Tom Gilmore and Sister Cities of Los Angeles, thank you. May I answer any more questions?
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Ms. Yang?
No.
I mean, it's great that we have this program, and we're trying to encourage our sister cities to be partners with us. I think it's important as we move forward to every area of influence that we have that we're pushing. So next, I'd like to ask Lisa Trifelli of LAWA to join us at the table.
Good afternoon, council members. Lisa Trifelli, Director of Environmental.
I mispronounced your name again. So
that's okay.
Trifelli.
Director of Environmental and Land Use Planning. I'd like to introduce also Tammy McCrossin-Orr, my colleague who's helping lead the sustainability program at LAWA. We're really proud of the sustainability program and our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas and improve air quality emissions at the airport. And we're very excited that we have a new general manager that cares deeply about this issue and is really working to elevate sustainability across the board. So I just wanted to say that, and I'll turn it over to Tammy to tell you a little bit about our program, the challenges, the work underway, and how we plan to make major improvements in this area.
Okay. Good afternoon. We submitted, I believe last week, a preliminary report on the greenhouse gas inventory for LAX. It's preliminary. We are working on adding Ontario and Van Nuys and Palmdale. And also this, our preliminary report only covers what are called Scope 1 and 2 emissions, and those are emissions that LAWA directly owns or controls. So that includes emissions from our fleet of vehicles, and it also includes emissions from our purchased electricity. What it doesn't include would be, and what are the largest source of emissions at the airport are the aircraft and other various sources that we don't control from our tenants' operations, concessionaires, ground access vehicles. We are working on updating that. That's a much longer, because we have to collect information from the tenants and concessionaires and the airlines. It's a much longer process, but we are working on doing that, and we will update this report and update the council when that's finished. So this is so for 2014. Here's our preliminary inventory for LAX. As you can see, the biggest source of emissions are from our purchased electricity. Although this could be much higher, DWP has a large portfolio of renewable energy, so that brings down our emissions. So as DWP gets better, we get better. And I think really the most important thing to note is actually what's missing, and that would be the emissions from aircraft. Just a preliminary estimate based on the amount of fuel that is pumped into aircraft at LAX. Our LAWA's Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions would be less than 1% of the emissions compared to the emissions from the aircraft. In 2008, LAWA prepared a GHG inventory, and we actually estimated our emissions back to 1990. As you can see, between 2005 and 2014, we've decreased our emissions by 21%. I'm sorry, that was between 1990 and 2014. And that's by doing the actions that we're already doing, energy efficiency, improving GSE, improving our fleet of alternative fuel vehicles, and a number of other programs that we'll talk about. The 21% decrease is based on the actions that we're currently doing. We're in the process of doing more. And LAWA is not alone in the aviation industry. Many other airports across the country are committing to reducing GHGs. Atlanta is committed to a 20% reduction over 2008 levels by 2020. The important thing to note about Atlanta's goal is it's on a per passenger basis. One of the issues with decreasing our GHG emissions is the projected growth in activity at LAX. So the way that Atlanta has dealt with that is by tying it to passenger activity. San Francisco has also committed to the 80% reduction. I would just note that 80% reduction is in sources that San Francisco controls, so that does not include the aircraft.
So one of the things why we are looking at practices at other airports is because we are federally preempted from controlling aircraft. What we're doing is we're not only looking at the activities of our sister agencies, such as the Port, such as Metro or DWP here in LA, but we're also looking at trying to understand the best practices across the board at airports nationally and find ways to bring those strategies here to LAWA, to LAX especially. And so I think that was one of the reasons why we started looking at the goals, the strategies, and the successes that the other airports have had in working, for example, with the airlines who sometimes have not been supportive of these efforts. So what we want to be able to do is share with you, that we acknowledge that we have a major task ahead of us on reducing GHG, but we are in the process of actually for the first time ever actually tackling this with real information as compared to anecdotes and stories, and we're really going to look at a measured approach. We have a full-scale emissions inventory for LAX, Van Nuys, and Ontario as part of the South Coast AQMD state implementation plan. We have a baseline for 2014, and we have a projection out to 2024 and 2035. And as part of that AQMP update, working with AQMD, we're looking at all kinds of strategies that we could put in play to reduce our emissions and put those emissions then into the state implementation plan. That is a process that's taking place over the course of this year. As we just talked about, yes?
I want to ask a question on the federal preemption of being able to do anything to regulate the Scope 3.
Yes.
It sounds totally reasonable. So I suppose that means that this council or the Board of Airport Commissioners could not pass a policy that says to land at the airport, you need to reduce, airlines must have this standard or this technology, whatever.
That is correct.
But let me tease that out a little bit. Could we, as we negotiate lease agreements for terminals, put requirements in for incentives?
I don't know all the answers to this, but I think in terms of it being voluntary and incentive-based, I think that there are things that we should explore to see how we could do it that way as compared to a mandate. For example.
Because if we're going to give them something,
right,
then we should be able to ask for more in return.
Right. This is why we want to do this research across the airports to see who structured certain programs. For example, it may not even be aircraft and the engines, but to the extent that we could encourage single-engine taxiing around the airport. That would be a huge emissions reduction. Now, we don't require that because the pilots have control of the aircraft, but we know that in practice, the airlines don't want to have dual engines taxing for fuel and for cost reasons. So I think that there's a way to craft these incentives and these policies, such as a single engine taxing, that would really help in terms of, maybe they're in leases, maybe they're in other kinds of agreements.
Could we say, starting in 2020, if you aren't using a certain type of technology, our landing fees will be higher than they are currently? Have two different tiers?
That, I think, would require some assistance with folks at some outside counsel that work on federal preemption to understand that. Okay. I know that in the past, our former management believed that was not possible. I think it's part of this AQMP update, knowing where we're going with unprecedented growth. I think those are strategies that we need to explore. Now, one of the things that we can do are all the other things that are not aircraft, but are everything else under the landowner control. As you know, we are really proud that we have an alternative vehicle fleet that's over 75% of the LAWA are alternative fuels using CNG. 100% of our courtesy shuttle fleet are powered by natural gas. We just made history in working with Airlines for America, who traditionally oppose on federal preemption grounds any kind of effort to require airlines to, for example, convert all of their ground support equipment over to clean fleet. And so we have now a target, a goal, and we see airlines actually in practice bringing over electric equipment. We have CNG stations. We have an alternative. Commercial vehicles over 8,500 pounds are required to be alternative fuel. And we're looking at retooling that because I don't believe that program right now is as effective as it could be. And that's one of the things we're looking to update to make it more enforceable, using lease agreements, using licenses agreements as enforcement tools. As you know, we're proposing the Landside Access Modernization Program, a people mover connecting to the Metro Regional Rail. As part of that effort, we're also looking at how do we expand the LAWA rideshare van pool program. We're proud that we, out of 4,000 LAWA employees, we have 25% participation. But what we're doing right now is understanding that out of the 48,000 people coming to work at the LAX every day, that includes all the airlines, the concessions, the contractors, 50% of the people live within 2 miles in Inglewood, Hawthorne, and Lenox. So we're trying to understand how we could grow our rideshare program to capture all of the employees at the airport to reduce trips to the airport and thus improve air quality. Again, we have one of the best in clean construction equipment. We commit to Tier 4, 2010 haul trucks. We have batch plants, rock crushers. We do all kinds of stuff to keep that on campus. And again, we also are making progress on the electrification of all of our gates, and we could improve and continue to work on the electrification at the hangars, our airport, our aircraft parking spaces, and our cargo areas. We're kicking off solar. We do not have we do not have any solar at the airport at LAX, and we just are able to we're going to issue an NTP coming this week for a solar siting study and doing a feasibility study, because we have a ton of parking and rooftops that we can put solar in. We're also implementing energy efficiency in all of our buildings, including the new central utility plant. And I think what we need to do is craft with our new management and as part of this AQMP update, clear targets, working with FAA, CARB, and our airline stakeholders. And again, as Tammy referenced, we're going to do this GHG inventory across Van Nuys, Ontario, and looking at our Scope 3. And we also have a program that the airlines, the ACI has started. It's an airport carbon accreditation program, and we've been requested to apply and participate in that program. And that's a way to which monitor us year over year. So these are the kinds of things that we're doing, and we're happy to keep reporting back to you.
Great. Now we want to continue that. And following up on what Mr. Bonin was talking about, and is the indirect stuff, is how do we create the incentives for the areas that we can't mandate? What are the incentives that we can do, both for the airplanes but for all the other vendors as well? Because I imagine it's a lot easier to do the vendor incentives, just like we were talking about in TNC discussion about some of the, greening those fleets. And we're taking a look. In fact, is there any updates on that? Because that was something you guys
That was on the Uber and Lyft, the TNC?
Well, not on the overall issue, but on the greening of the fleet issue.
On the greening of the fleet, do you want to talk a little bit about?
All the TNCs.
For the LAWA fleet or for the commercial vehicles?
For the commercial vehicles.
So we have a program in place, and it's called the Alternative Fuel Vehicle Program. And what we are doing right now, we're looking at the policy. We believe the policy is a little bit outdated. We're working with our air quality experts, and we're going to update the policy so that it doesn't mandate a certain type of technology. So before, the policy said you have to be alternative fuel. There's some big trucks, there are no alternatives. But what the policy really isn't capturing is that new conventionally fueled vehicles are very, very clean. And so we're updating the policy to require, instead of alternative fuel, to require new vehicles or alternative fuel. And I think that's really going to improve our compliance rate. It's going to make it easier it's going to improve our emissions from our commercial fleet, and it's going to improve our compliance rate. And we're setting new goals for 100% compliance.
On your question about vendors, I think that we can make partnerships with our concessionaires and with our tenants. One of the things that we did was we set a meeting with all of the sustainability officers of the airlines to just understand how could we be better liaisons. This our sustainability team, working with LAWA. And some of the things we heard is that they need help in improving their recycling program at the airport. So that's the kind of relationship that we want to develop so that we can work with our vendors to create, because they have a will to do these kinds of programs at the airport. They just haven't had a willing, I want to say willing, but a partner to help them navigate the bureaucracy at the airport. And so that's what we're really trying to do.
I do have a lot more questions about sort of how this is going to go, but I'm looking forward to working with you guys as we move into the future, both on the TNC side of the Green Ledger, but also with all the vendors. But I'm very conscious of the time and keeping my quorum, so I'm going to, unless either of you have an additional pressing question.
I'll be quick. First of all, I just want to sing LAWA's praises for the work that they're doing on sustainability and on this issue. Of the three areas of emissions, the two that you have influence over and can control, the airport's doing a remarkable job, and I want to acknowledge that. And I think the things we're working on together at the airport, everything from LAMP to the CONRAC to the flyaway system, all feeds into that and strengthens that. Would like to see us pursue some of the things I was talking about that sort of address or touch on the federal preemption issue,
Yep.
and if there's ways to incentivize stuff. I'd also like us to think about what sort of legislative relief we might want. I don't think a bill designed to relieve us from the burdens of federal exemption would ever pass Congress, but assuming we get a different Congress eventually, and there's a whole bunch of environmentally friendly legislation, something that could go through under the rubric of climate change legislation, and that might be a time when we want to sort of push some on that. Two quick questions. One was on the rideshare strategies you're talking about. I think that work is very important, particularly given how close so many of the employees are to the airport, as you said. I just want to underscore my support for that, and if there's things that can be done in partnership with LA Metro to make that work better,
Yes.
please call upon me or Mr. Krikorian or the mayor's office. I'm sure we'll be happy to work that partnership there.
We will take you up on that because there are ways to partner with Metro in creating a shuttle program that could connect. I mean, instead of parking the employees,
Yep.
we can do a really good rideshare program.
Thank you. And the other thing I wanted to mention, which you also touched on, is the gate, cargo, and hangar electrification. You have done a really remarkable and stellar job on the passenger side of it, and I think it's really important for us to continue this. And I know that there's certainly interest at the airport in doing this. I just want to make sure we sort of raise the level of interest and attention on doing it for the cargo hangars as well. So I'd just ask for a report back on the progress of that so we can make sure that we're following that and that it stays on the sort of top of the pile of stuff to do at the airport.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Next, I'd like to bring up Chris Cannon to give us a succinct report on the port. And I apologize, I'm rushing everyone here. Again, we're under a time constraint with that.
It's quite all right. Good afternoon, council members. Last time I was before you, I had a very long report, so today I promise to be very brief.
And a very good one. We appreciate it. It was good. Much of it covered some of the stuff here.
Good, yes. We submitted to you, as you know, this report a while back that covered our actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'll talk a little bit about what is in this report, and then I'll take your questions if you have any. So as you know, our greenhouse gas is something that's part of our emissions inventories that we do every year. We've been doing this since 2006. We calculate CO2 equivalent emissions as part of this. We, like the airport, have Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. The Scope 1 and 2 are the ones that we control. Scope 1 is our equipment and our facilities. Scope 2 is the power generation, electricity generation that feeds that equipment and those facilities. So we actually calculate power plant emissions and so forth. And then Scope 3 is the emissions from our tenant sources, the ones that you know, of course, are ships, the trains, the trucks, the cargo handling equipment, and harbor craft. 98% of port-related emissions come from Scope 3. So Scope 3 is really the source that you need to count on. Based on clean air programs that you're familiar with, that we've implemented over the last 10 years that have shown some real success with our emissions inventories and actual emissions monitors in the community. A part of that has greenhouse gas benefits, and so we're at 15% below 1990 levels based on the calculations that we've done through 2014. And we're very proud of this. So with hard work, this trajectory that we've gone on, 1990 levels, 15% below, will take us within reach of the city's goals for 2030, 2045, and ultimately that 80% goal for 2050. But to accomplish this, we have to address our major sources of CO2 equivalent emissions, and those would be the trucks, number one, even more than the ships, which is a surprise. Number two is the ships, and number three is the cargo handling equipment. We just released a zero emissions white paper that was intended to give an idea of where we want to go with zero emissions testing. Frankly, the only way to meet the goals that are set by the city and AB 32 and the federal government and others is all or a major portion of goods movement is going to have to move to hybridization and electricity over the next 30 years. That's just it. There's no other way to accomplish it. And so our goal is to try to be leaders in that. Our zero emissions white paper talks about how we think cargo handling equipment is something in the near term, in the next 5 years, can begin that transition. Short haul drayage and long haul drayage will phase in after that, we believe. By 2050, all or close to all truck goods movement will have to be hybrid or full electric. And that's all, not just port related, everything. And all warehouse goods movement, handling equipment, such as forklifts, cranes, and yard trucks will have to be electric, all of it. And ships will need to adopt a combination of technologies, either engine technologies, aftermarket treatment technologies, and fuel technologies in order to dramatically reduce their emissions. And then trains are also going to have to use similar kinds of technologies to reduce their emissions locally and also as they cross the country. These sources we have no choice, in my mind, than to do this because greenhouse gas is no joke. This is, I believe, the #1 environmental crisis facing the world today. We've got, as I said, our efforts on our zero emission white paper will be led by our port and our engineering staff and the environmental staff. We've also got Port Tech LA, who is going to help stimulate the actions of small startup companies that have similar technologies, and they've already helped us with our Clean Air Action Plan in the past, and we hope and believe that they will continue. And if we accomplish this, then we will be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from port-related sources by 65%, which is a dramatic improvement. My opinion and our work, we need to accomplish all this. We need to be involved, engaged in an integrated goods movement strategy. It's not enough for the port to say we're going to do this, and Lisa and the airport says we're going to do that, and others are going to do something else, and it's all great. We need to actually work together and have an integrated goods movement strategic planning effort, not only here in the city, but across the state and across the United States. We need to organize ourselves and think about priorities for things like infrastructure, for goods movement corridors, for government funding, for targeted environmental strategies. Councilmember Bonin, you mentioned some stuff about airports and taxes and things like that that could influence those things. I couldn't agree with that more, except that I would say it can't happen just at LAX. It has to happen at every airport. And that's the way it would work. Just like it can't happen at Port of Los Angeles, it has to happen everywhere. One of the things that I was most happy to see is there's an ECA, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's Environmental Control Area, our Emissions Control Area, that was instituted for North America by EPA in coordination with international authorities. What that did is it requires very low sulfur fuel for ships to operate within 200 miles of the shores of North America. And the nice thing about that, it's great, it's caused a dramatic reduction in sulfur oxide emissions, but the good news about that is that it doesn't favor one port or another. It's all ports in the United States. All ships that enter 200 miles of any port in the United States have to do this. This, in my opinion, is what we've got to do, and not just because of competitive reasons, but because it's going to cost a lot of money for things like infrastructure to support zero emissions and plugging in equipment and manufacturing of hybrid and so forth equipment. And so the goods movement, the manufacturing industries need to understand and have clear direction as to where these things go. This is a daunting task, and but it's one that we wholeheartedly embrace and look forward to help carrying out. These things are exciting to me, and I really look forward to being a part of it.
Well, we really appreciate you stepping up to the challenge, the leadership that you've already exercised in this area, and your commitment to continuing that into the future. One quick question: How often does the port go back to confirm the emissions expectations? We have these programs, and then how often are we sort of truing it up with the actual?
Well, there's two things that happen. Every year we do an emissions inventory. It's a very detailed evaluation based on fuel usage, equipment hours of operation, duty cycles. We confirm all this with all of the sources, and then it's QA'd, checked by the EPA, by the Air Resources Board, and by the South Coast AQMD as part of there's a panel that actually checks our information. So that's done every year, and that information is used for the state implementation plan, so it has to be accurate. And then in addition to that, we have real-time air monitoring stations, 4 of them, that were actually developed based on AQMD protocols. And they're real time. You can go online right now and you can look and see what the air emissions are at any one of those 4 stations today at the port. And then each year we do a report of those to show sort of a trend over the year. And what you see is interesting. You see a trend when you plot that over the last 10 years. The actual air monitors show the same slope as the actual as our emissions inventory. So it means they're having a positive effect. Now, the emissions are higher when you look at the air monitoring station because that takes everything. You know, that's regional air is contribute to that. But it continues to go down at the same slope as the sources from the port. So those are the ways we do it. Each year we do those 2 reports, and then the real-time monitoring occurs. Like I said, you can look at it up right now.
I appreciate that, and we certainly look forward to drilling down on this stuff as we move forward in the year, and this is a good overview. Any other quick questions on this one?
Just one quickly, Mr. Chairman. Want to put on my AQMD hat. As we gear up for the AQMP in 2016, I just want to commend both the airport and the Port of Los Angeles for looking and creating these types of opportunities and exploring these opportunities to lower our greenhouse gas emissions. As a child of the Port of Los Angeles, I've seen the amazing improvement in our air quality. Growing up in San Pedro, where we have still high rates of cancer and asthma in our harbor area communities. We've seen drastic improvements, and this is definitely a work in progress, and I want to commend both the port and the airport for making their ongoing commitment. And I think also we have an opportunity to create some green jobs as well. We know today in Paris, we have both the governor and the leader of the Senate, Kevin De Leon, who's pushing and advocating for these types of green businesses to come to California. I'm glad, Chris, that you mentioned Port Tech LA. It needs to be in the forefront and finding ways to advocate for these green jobs here in our port. I know we're going to expand our port, but they're doing it a green way, and I'm happy to continue to advocate and lead that effort. So thank you so much for the hard work, and looking forward to continuing this discussion as we move forward. And thank you, Mr. Kretz, for joining us as well.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We have 5 cards. I'd like to call up Paula Waxman, followed by Steve Coffer, followed by Kent Minuet.
Hi, my name is Paula Waxman. I represent the South Robertson Neighborhood Council, who wholeheartedly supports this motion. Climate change is an enormous global problem, and yet this motion asks us to solve it by changing our own habits and perhaps compromising our standard of living. Yet consider this. According to the World Bank, between 2011 and 2015, carbon emissions in the U.S. was up to 17 metric tons per capita. China came in at 6.7 metric tons per capita, and in India, a mere 1.7 metric tons. So per person, we emit almost 3 times more carbon dioxide than China and India combined. So I am proud of the progress that Los Angeles has made to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and overjoyed at this motion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Coffer, followed by Mr. Minuet, followed by Judith Trumbo.
Thank you. My name is Steve Coulter. I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles Business Council to express our strong support for this motion. As world leaders meet in Paris, now is the time for LA to demonstrate its leadership on a global stage by adopting this goal. We are pleased to see that this motion will direct the various city departments, utilities and ports, and neighborhood councils to engage in developing climate action plans to get us there. We also support the goal to reduce LADWP's GHG emissions by 80% by 2030. This is an achievable goal. LADWP plans to divest completely from coal. That'll get us most of the way there. And the utility has a number of great programs that they can build upon that have not only avoided GHG emissions, but also created jobs and leveraged private investment. When we look, I think this is a great opportunity for leadership from the City Council to ensure that they meet those goals. I'd just like to close in saying, why is a business organization supportive of this motion? We've been working with, over businesses in California have been working to adapt to AB 32 and our major statewide legislation for the past decade, and we've seen plenty of evidence that those strategies to protect our climate have been good for business because it has been a part of the strategy. It's led to new markets for businesses and technology and jobs. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Kent.
Minot, yes, I'm not a classic dance, actually.
Minot.
Yeah. I'm a staff organizer with the Sierra Club's My Gen campaign, and yes, I also enthusiastically support Councilman Corrett's resolution here for 80 by 50. And as he said, this is mainstream now. It's not radical anymore. Stanford University just came out with their IRENA report, which joins a whole pile of other reports, basically saying that 100% renewable energy economy is technologically and economically feasible by 2030. Renewables frequently are developed faster than the policy initiatives that prompted them in the first place. And of course, climate scientists are constantly telling us that it's later than you think. Notice that San Diego, with its Republican mayor, is poised to commit to 80% greenhouse gas reduction by 2050, as well as 100% clean energy from their utility by 2035. So, again, I enthusiastically support this, and the Sierra Club looks forward to working with City Council on implementing this in actual fact. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Minot.
Yes.
Apologize. Ms. Trumbo, followed by Ann Rushton.
Yes, this is Ann Rushton. I'm speaking on behalf of the League for this motion. And I am with the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles and specifically on the Climate Committee. And in fact, we already have a letter of support in the file on this that was some months ago. So we're glad to see it's finally come up to the committee level, and we're very eager for it to get to the full City Council. The League, as you may know, is nonpartisan, but we do study and advocate on issues, not parties or candidates. But this is an issue the League takes very seriously at the national, state, and city level. And so we are very encouraged to see that the departments of the city are already acting on this even before it's gotten to the City Council. That's extremely gratifying to us, but we really want the City Council buy-in to a climate action plan, which will become part of the general plan, so it is permanently ensconced in the city's legislative structure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what we wanted. I have nothing to add, but
Great.
just here in support. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both. So, an exciting idea Mr. Kretz is moving forward. The state has also set several goals for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. AB 32 requires California to reduce its GHG emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. This April, we had an executive order from Governor Brown that the state must cut pollutants to 40% below the 1990 levels by the year 2030. It's an interim target intended to help California lower its emissions to 80% below 1990 levels by the year 2050, as is put forward by the motion. Very ambitious but extremely important goals for the future. The city and the departments need to adopt this goal and plan for its fulfillment, as with the leadership of Mr. Koretz. And so the recommendation from this committee is going to be that all city departments, including the proprietaries, develop plans to meet the targets in Governor Brown's Executive Order B3015 and Executive Order S305. The analysts should include short, medium, and long-term solutions, the cost of implementation, and should seek reductions in all three classifications of emissions. And then we will note and file the department's reports. And without objections, that will be the order. So moved. Seeing no objection, that is the order to move forward. And that brings us now to item 1, which is a report only. So, Mr. Buscaino, if you need to leave. Thank you. Congratulations.
And Councilmember Buscaino, would you like me to read that into the record?
Yeah, if you could read item 1 into the record, that would be great.
Thank you. Item number 1 is a verbal report from the Information Technology Agency relative to the top 10 department priorities.
Good afternoon. Ted Ross, General Manager with the Information Technology Agency. This TCT, I have the honor to be able to present ITA's top 10 priorities. So I'll go ahead and go through them and speak to them a little bit. I think it's a good opportunity, as the councilman, as the chair, has provided for departments to be able to show some of the top priorities for the coming month. It incorrectly says November 2015 because it was drafted in November 2015. It's definitely a December top 10 list. The first item is certainly CityLink LA. We're at the point now of evaluation of submissions. As the council members know, the city released an RFP for vendor development of advanced fiber optics and Wi-Fi infrastructure. I'm very happy to say that it was released in June 2015, and then recently we received the submissions. So we have 3 major submissions for that. The city is offering up various assets as well as expedited permitting to be able to build not just higher speed internet capabilities, but also higher availability. So the details of the submissions I will not be able to disclose, but we've put together our multi-department evaluation committee to be able to negotiate and roll that forward. El Nino services.
Before you get
please.
to El Nino.
Absolutely.
CityLink, obviously, as you know, is something I'm very excited about.
Yes.
So what is our timing, do you think, in terms of hearing back from the CAO and from IT with a recommendation?
We're currently targeting of having negotiations completed by the March timeframe.
By the March timeframe. Great.
We know there's certainly flexibility and variability, and there's sometimes complexity, but we want to move as expeditiously as possible because we see this as a value to the community, so we want to bring the value as soon as possible.
Right. And I know there's a lot of sensitivity because it's a submission, and I'm not going to ask for any, I don't want you to say anything that you're not supposed to.
You couldn't torture them out of me.
What's that?
You couldn't torture me to get it.
Good. But can you tell us generically about the evaluation process so that we sort of have that out on the record?
Absolutely. When the RFP was released, it provides all sorts of opportunities. While the city really doesn't pay for these services, it grants opportunities. It's opportunities to leverage city assets for a fiber optics infrastructure. You'd be surprised if you're trying to really roll out fiber optics across the city, there's a lot of complexity associated with it. So assets such as allowing access to, let's say, sewers to be able to run the conduit through there allows you to cross freeways. The ability to access certainly the overground light posts, et cetera. All these give all the different capabilities to it. And so, and expedited permitting, the same thing there. So what we were doing is we were going to be using the criteria stated in the RFP, and we have a multi-departmental group where we thoroughly review, we discuss, we allow proposals from those vendors, and then we go ahead and make a determination based on the criteria that we already provided.
And last question, at least from me on this one. The status of the digital infrastructure permitting group, where are we on that?
So we've been working with Bureau of Engineering as well as other city departments, and we're working with the CEO currently to get the report in for that to be go ahead and funded and processed.
So soon?
Soon, absolutely.
Spot any questions on that one? No. Okay, so then carry on with the other 9 items.
That's right.
Going important, but important items.
That's right. Going from CityLink to Storm, El Nino certainly is very top priority. From the ITA perspective, often when you run IT, maybe it's hard to understand or appreciate really the levels of complexity of what we have to do when it comes to this. And the ITA has a lot of areas touched by this. So certainly we run the public safety radio systems. So we're taking various steps to increase the resiliency and ensure that fire, police, as well as other city departments have the communications they need in the field. We're also working with our Channel 35 to be able to publish information, so both from a website as well as from a TV side and social media to be able to promote preparedness across Los Angeles. It's extremely important that people prepare before the storms come. We're often lulled into a sense of There you go, false security. I knew you'd have the right terms for it. When we look outside and see beautiful weather. But the reality is there's a 95+% chance that this will be a very strong El Nino, and now is the time to be prepared for it. We are also putting together a interactive map and a variety of other tools that we think will help engage the citizens. Next item, Mile A311 CRM.
What are our big vulnerabilities? And is P4 going to flood? What are the big vulnerabilities we need to worry about?
So certainly, we're used to rains, but the rains are torrential. They could actually impact some of our radio facilities, so we want to make sure those are areas that we're securing. We're also taking the steps to make sure that P4 doesn't have, the flooding could really come from one location, and so we're making sure we shore that up just in case. We haven't had flooding for some time, so we feel we're pretty good in that sense. We've got water detection, a variety of other sensors also just in case as a fail-safe. Those are probably the two biggest areas, and honestly, if it really gets bad enough, it's ITA being able to provide support to the EOC, to be able to support other departments in their operations, because ultimately, fire, police, and others are the ones who are that first-line responders, and we have to be able to support them. Mile A311 CRM system, so that's certainly a big one. We launched in August. We have almost 500,000 requests processed through that system that go through the 301 system. We're currently in the process of making sure we're stabilizing, making sure we're good in the request fulfillment department, such as in Public Works, and we're getting ready to be able to do a full public launch. We actually have a meeting later on this afternoon with Public Works and the Public Works Board to touch base in regards to the full public launch. PCI 3.0 compliance. As you can see, we have some very meaty items here on this list, right? Yeah. And so we go from one very sensitive issue to another. We're working very closely. When I came into this position, I reached out to finance. I'm working very closely with finance and the Trustwave vendor to thoroughly go through the different 20 systems and to make sure that we're proposing the right approach for segmenting and improving. There's already been remediation in various systems at airports, at DWP, et cetera, and they're taking that approach. And where we're in the process right now is we have a set of very clear guidelines being developed by Trustwave that we're going to go run through. It's basically an audit and a health check for every city department who runs a system that accepts credit card information. And what we're going to find is that remediation will be slightly different between the set of them. What we likely expect is that some departments will be well underway. They're already well underway, and they will be well underway to resolve it themselves. And so we have to start shortlisting the departments who are having significant issues. There may be legacy systems, et cetera. But instead of us trying to ruggedize our entire city network to be able to support PCI compliance, the strategy is to be able to isolate those areas that process credit cards. And this is a very common private sector approach, to be able to push credit card transactions maybe off the network into strong third-party vendors so that we're not really handling or managing sensitive credit card information, but we're using a vendor service who does it as a paid service, globally.
Does this have anything to do with the chip readers and the credit cards?
So indirectly, yes. And so for those who are at point of sale, they're leveraging those devices. But it also has to do with the fact that our systems don't need to be maintaining credit card information on them. To do so, they have to meet a level or a standard that really the city shouldn't be trying to meet. I think the right approach is for us to be able to use the credit card information and get financial details of the transaction. We just need to know something was paid and the amount it was paid for. We don't really need to know 16 characters associated with someone's credit card information. That just makes it that much more difficult for us to be able to digitally protect citizens' credit card information. That's not the business we want to be in government. Right. Mainframe migration to the cloud. So we've been very much in process of moving our P4 IBM mainframe system, legacy system that still runs more apps than we would like to admit, but we've been very aggressively moving it off, moving it to IBM Z Cloud. So we're currently in the process. We've completed in-depth migration analysis. We have a good understanding of timing and all the types of details involved with the process. And we're currently in the process of working through terms and conditions with the vendor.
Is there anything left on the mainframe?
There are certainly items left on the mainframe. Some of the biggest items are public safety. And so those are items in which there are multi-year replacements. Where we run into a very sensitive issue around the mainframe, the light stuff we've already moved off. The medium stuff we're doing in progress. But one of the issues we'll run into is it's very difficult to get mainframe staff. And so as the city reaches this silver tsunami, this retirement wave, we're going to be disproportionately impacted in the mainframe side versus modern client-server types of systems. I can't get someone to graduate out of a university with a mainframe degree. Those don't exist anymore. So it's very much a legacy skill set. While we run some very important applications on it, we're A, reduced in our functionality. Mainframe is not where we want to grow. And B, we're going to start to have a lot of issues when it comes to support and maintenance. So this is an excellent opportunity for us to be able to repurpose staff to move them away from mainframe support into where we're building today, which is in a client-server platform.
So when do we get to recycle the mainframe?
Once we move this to the cloud, they'll be running the mainframes, and then we can start. We'll get reductions in costs as we move apps off of it. So we're aggressively moving off the apps, but we're also aggressively getting this hosted by a vendor who has great mainframe understanding, and will have it for decades. Because mainframe is not where we want to build.
Is there a time goal for no more mainframe?
There is. I just want to get through our terms and conditions first. That's taken longer than I was hoped to be able to get there. The LAPD body-worn cameras. So as the council members know, we've already completed, as a city, 3 LAPD stations. There's over 800 cameras that are being utilized as a pilot from officers. We support the network side and a lot of the infrastructure associated with it. And we're currently in the process of planning out and getting ready to build out into another 18 stations.
Any challenges with this? I mean, it's a huge...
With anything new, there always are challenges. We actually encountered an incident early on in which an entity actually dug and broke a fiber line, and so we actually had to be able to do some backup and duplicates when it comes to that station. We very quickly got that resolved, and so a lot of it's just our ability to be able to support the volume associated with it, but generally speaking, it's actually been very successful. Well architected and executing well. But it's a brand new service for us as a city, and so it's just something that we continue to work through any kinks. ITA Ready Workforce Plan. Staffing is a critical issue, as I referenced before. I come into managing this department at a unique time, a time in which over half of our staff are eligible to retire in the next 3 years. Very few organizations can say that. So both we hit it on the back end in the sense that we've had about a 40% reduction in people since 2008, and we're going to catch it on the front end as we start to lose more people. And with those people, we're going to lose a lot of institutional knowledge. So we've worked with personnel department to come up with a succession plan. We've identified some of those key classifications, the most sensitive of them, and we're also expanding it. Our take is not just about succession planning. For us to be a top-notch IT organization, government or not, it's very important for us to do everything well. So we're working very hard to redesign our recruitment planning, redesign how we do our testing, working very closely with personnel on that. We're redoing onboarding, staff development, retention, and then succession planning, which we just see as the end of that cycle. So we're very aggressively documenting and drafting and executing our plans around staff and staff retention. You can't have a good IT department without having good IT staff.
It's one opportunity, though, with the downside. You lose all that institutional knowledge, but you have the opportunity to shape a new department. And
I'm with you there. A little quick sideline, we're also doing it with executive management. So Steve left and I took his position. We've hired 2 new deputy CIOs, and with the retirement of Mark Wolf, we're going to have another brand new executive officer. So management's changing over and staff are changing over. In December, yes, he's retiring.
Did you know that?
Yes, he is.
He's way too young.
I've told him that myself. But yes.
Doesn't have to go through our committee? Is he allowed to do that?
Yeah.
I don't remember approving that.
Even the far reach of council doesn't quite extend to that. I've said the same.
All right.
So we're looking at brand new management and we're looking at brand new staff. And once again, there's going to be challenges and difficulty to it, but we look to plan ahead, we look to set up the right mechanisms in place, and we look to attract bright people inside and outside the city to run a top-notch IT organization. Graphic violence and social media council motion, another top priority for us. So as the council members are familiar with, council passed a motion sponsored by Councilman Blumenfield and others in regards to reaching out to major social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Vine, and Snapchat to facilitate the removal of graphic violence images when requested by family members. So we're working with city attorney and we're seeking to establish the proper policies across those social media sites and be able to have a mechanism for expedited requests during those types of incidents. we go from sometimes the exciting or the big to sometimes what seems like the mundane but critical for ITA. We are in the process of doing our LA Tax Oracle database upgrade. LA Tax is a system that actually processes over $2 billion in revenues for the city of LA. And so we're moving from a end-of-life database version into a very modern database version, which will extend the life through about 2021 when it's estimated to go end-of-life. So it's a big process, a lot of back-end work. We expect to have no impacts to our users, and we're fully in the process of making that migration. Another item that's much like that too, it gets down to the belly of the beast, is replacement of the data center storage area network. So much like you have a hard drive on your computer, this is the hard drive for very, very, very big systems. So we're replacing some failing Hitachi VSP and Dell compellent storage area networks to a new HP 3-par storage system. It's 400 terabytes in size. That is absolutely massive. And it runs some of our biggest systems, our financial system, our payroll system, our purchasing system, et cetera. And that's it for the top 10 for ITA.
That's great. Very much appreciate the top 10. And without objection, we'll note and file that. No other questions? No objection. Great, thank you. And so we have one public comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one public comment card from Ms. Ramirez. That's the last item on the agenda.
Again, thank you very much to the city attorney as well. Thank you. Thank you. To better improve the flow of commerce and trade, shut down all illegal wetback and Chango Latino criminal gang monopolies at all Los Angeles ports. They are dangerous, along with theft of millions of dollars of stolen merchandise. Also, rather than installing street banners announcing the Port of Los Angeles event from January 2016 through December 2016, have some style, innovation, and class by using our beloved Daredevil pilots extraordinaire to fly the banners for all of LA to see. These darling, wonderful, creative, cheerful, happy-go-lucky, zany, loving pilots from Gillespie and San Diego deserve that sacred privilege to give the alert of all city items via the Los Angeles airspace, since they fly over City Hall night and day. Lastly, our United States military aviators and all our pilots are the jackpot of a vibrant, tantalizing civilization. God bless our pilots, military, and bravo to El Jefe, Donald Trump. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Ramirez.
Thank you.
This concludes the meeting of the IGTCT new committee. Thank you all for being here.